good to be back. Okay, today we are going back to the beginning of my gaming experiences. The first Nintendo 64 game I ever played. What's that? No, it's not Mario 64. Nope, it's not Mario anything, actually. It is Gex, Enter the Gecko for the Nintendo 64, and yes, this label has seen better days. There was like a yard sale attempt on this cartridge, and sorry. But Gex was actually the first N64 game I ever played. It was the first one that we owned when we got a Nintendo 64. That and another game called F1 Grand Prix. Those were the two first games. If anyone's curious, I didn't have Mario 64 until way later, like almost when N64 was on the way out. I actually had Smash Bros. Before any other Nintendo game. It's through Smash Bros. That I learned about Zelda, Metroid, Mario, etc. Anyway, getting back to Gex. So Gex is a very nostalgic game for me. Accordingly, it's been probably 20 years since I've played the N64 version of the game. I did play the PlayStation 1 version like 7-10 years ago, something like that, whenever it came available on like the PlayStation Store, and I really enjoyed it. It was like pretty cool to experience that version of it that I never played before. But today, we're going back to N64. With that said, the capture quality, like for N64 going, like it's coming off of an actual N64 going in here, so it's not the greatest. I apologize, it's the best that I can do. Generally, I want to still steer clear from the emulation. I want to play the game like as it was, in all of its old, terrible quality. It's not that bad, I'm just letting you know now. I also got a new controller pack, which is great because now I can actually save games, because I haven't had a working controller pack also in probably 20 years. So games like Gex and Pokemon Stadium can't even save the games on because they require the pack thing. But, alright, let's get into Gex. So what is Gex? Or rather, who is Gex? Well, Gex is a mascot character, at least he was a mascot character, of Crystal Dynamics, the same company that makes Tomb Raider, even those newer ones that have come out over the last like 6 years, which is pretty cool that not only are they still in business, but they're making great games. Bring back Gex, maybe, who knows? But Gex is a television-obsessed gecko who spends all of his time watching TV. He knows movies and TV shows really well, and when you're playing the games, he's spouting one-liners all over the place. The game itself is an action platformer, kind of set up in the same style as Mario 64, in the sense that it has a hub world that you launch the levels from. Each level contains set objectives to complete, which, when they complete, all work toward the greater goal of getting farther into the hub world. But every level is themed after a television genre. And I say genre because they're not like aimed specifically at like spoofing a particular franchise. Like, there isn't a level where it's like, oh yes, this is all inspired by Nightmare on Elm Street exclusively. Like, no, it's all just like general haunted house stuff, or like a kind of cartoony, vibrant landscape with elements of like Looney Tunes or cartoons in general. There's a space level where it's like asteroids and aliens and rockets. There's a dinosaur one. That was my favorite when I was a kid. It's like a prehistoric kind of volcano. There's also a cave version. And then there's also one where you're like inside of computer machinery, equipment, and then the Kung Fu Theater, which is running around fighting ninjas and whatnot. So they're all like inspired by genres. The N64 version actually has one exclusive level, which is an underwater level that also contains a portion where you climb up the Titanic in the position it was in the Titanic movie when it's like going straight down. So that's like one of the very few instances in the game where it is like specifically giving you some kind of element from a TV show or movie. But for the most part, it's genre inspired. But you jump in these levels, you go through, every level has 2 or 3, very rarely 1 objective to complete. You just navigate until you either meet the conditions to spawn or find a red remote. Getting a red remote will end the level, and then you can either jump back in for the other objectives or go to a different level. collect enough red remotes and you will trigger the boss television in that area to turn on, which upon completion will open up the next area. So very Mario 64 inspired. One thing I'll say that I don't like right off the gate is that the hub world is very just flavorless. It's just like marble in a white void. There's like no personality to it. It's just bland, which is a shame because they could have done a lot with that. I'm not really sure what I could suggest they would have done, but like if the whole premise is that you're running around a thing called the media dimension, I mean, there's so much more you could have done with it than just what this presentation is. It's just so bleh. Every area every area does look the same. The only difference with areas is just architecture. Some areas have like, one area has a roof, one area has like moss covering some of it. Like the changes are so minor between comparing it to Mario 64. Like the castle had like three stories, and they were all very different from each other. The first was like that weird like daycare looking scenery, and you go downstairs, it's like a dark dungeon with like metal walls and like water's flooded the area. You go up and it's like, now it's like a castle, it's like a ring around. Up again, it's a darker room. So like everything, it looks very different. Whereas in Gex, it doesn't have that same vibe. It all looks kind of the same, which is kind of a bummer, to be honest. But there are far worse things to complain about. Getting back to talking about Gex himself, certain levels, Gex's appearance will actually change. He'll wear certain costumes. There's not many though. The prehistoric levels, he'll wear like kind of a caveman sash type thing, and then the space levels, he has like a full-on astronaut suit. The Titanic one, he has a wetsuit on, but that's kind of it. There's certain areas in the cartoon levels where he wears either like a bunny outfit or like a duck costume, but there's no themed costume for the horror levels or the regular cartoon stuff. Oh, and the Kung Fu one, he has like a Kung Fu jacket on. So like it's kind of neat that he themes himself for most of the levels. He has a tuxedo on in the hub world, which is really weird. There's no context for that in the N64 version unless you have the manual, which, like I've said before with this stuff, I don't have them anymore, so that's what the internet's for though. Works out. As you go through the game though, whether it's on certain conditions being met, like Gex takes damage or like passes a certain object or something, he'll spout the one-liners voiced by Dana Gould. So some of them are just like quotes from movies, like Austin Powers stuff or stuff like that. Some of them were like jokes about celebrities. Some of them can get pretty obscure. Like I can't imagine that a lot of the target audience for this game would get a lot of these.
Forget about it. Hey, I feel like I'm trapped in Boy George's pants. Shark! Has anyone seen Fox Mulder's sister? Had 1 million years, 2 white tigers, and we're at Siegfried and Roy.
Like, yeah, I was totally watching the X-Files when I was 7 years old, and know who Boy George is. Like, come on. Some of them are, like, legit funny, but I will say this. When I picked up the N64 version again, I was doing some research on it. Apparently, up to 500 lines from Gex were cut from the PlayStation 1 version to the N64 version because of memory reasons. N64, the cartridges were definitely inferior to what the PlayStation 1's discs could do. And because of that, stuff got cut. Not just Gex's dialogue, but even content. There's one core level that's gone, called Poltergex. It's one of the haunted house levels. And there's a whole bunch of bonus levels that were removed too. Plus dialogue and cutscenes too. There's an opening and ending cutscene on the PlayStation version. Those are not in the N64 version. The game just boots up to the menu and then you hit start and that's it. There's nothing else. Just to give you a quick comparison, here's the PlayStation 1 title screen.
Coming through.
Okay, he like runs in, the bad guy's chasing him, the remote animation. Okay, now the N64 version.
It's tail time.
There's no bad guy, it's static, you know, like stuff like that. For that reason, a lot of people, including myself, absolutely, consider the N64 version to be something of a butchered port. It's kind of the term you can use. So much was cut from it that it's almost like, why'd you even try? Like, you're removing a lot of the game's identity by getting rid of all those lines of dialogue, and you're just removing context and sense from it by removing cutscenes and stuff. Content being missing isn't the biggest problem, though. I can live with all that, because the game is still complete. They didn't remove, like, 50 levels. It was just 1 plus bonuses, so we're still okay as far as the playthrough goes. It's definitely a bummer not to have more jokes, but, the bigger issue is the camera and the control. So the control is a little weird. I feel like I'm always trying to correct what Gex is trying to do. It's really hard to explain unless you put it in your own hands. But it's like I feel like I always have to just like nudge him around and do like micromanagement for his movement. He doesn't really seem to have like... Going back to Mario 64, Mario could like sneak, walk, and run. Gex seems to only be able to go from stop to kind of moving to maximum speed. And the difference between kind of moving and max speed is very narrow, which makes precision movement very difficult. And it caused me a ton of deaths, particularly in the space levels. Cue the montage.
Has anyone...
It's ridiculous. I hated those space levels because of that. The other issue that compounds on top of the control is the camera. Okay, so let me also reference Mario 64 again. Mario 64 is very smart with its camera design because you have manual control, but the camera is also scripted to move on certain things, like you see here. You go through these bars, the camera swings around, it keeps following you, it turns around the next corner, all automatically. Is it perfect? No, of course not. But it's still really good. Gex, it has moments like that, but they're pretty rare from what I was feeling. You're spending most of it trying to manually adjust. And it's not always the best at adjusting. You're still struggling to get like the best angle on the action, the best perspective. It's hard to tell what's going on. Combine that with the issues with control, and again, so many deaths. Just so many deaths. Which eventually led to a game over. And here's the problem with the game over. You get a game over, and the game says, hey, press A to try again, and it loads up on a new game. Let's think about that for a second. You're like 4 hours into the game, and the game's like, hey, you gotta start over. Excuse me? Like, can you imagine playing like any Zelda game, and like you're 8 hours in, and you die for the first time? And you get booted back to the title screen and your save file's not there? New game! Like, what? So, don't worry though. You can load your previous game. Thank you, controller pack. Here's the issue though. It loads the last time that game was saved. Which means you have 0 lives. It's the last attempt before... Like, it was the last successful mission. So I completed a mission having 0 lives. That's where the game saved. Which means if I die again, it's game over and I have to load that state again. That is insane. It should boot you back to the title screen, you load in with like, 3 lives or whatever, and then you go from there. The punishment is getting kicked out of the level. The punishment shouldn't be that you get this weird state where you're always loading off on the edge of the cliff. That's ridiculous. I can't compare that to Mario 64. I'm gonna do a lot of Mario 64 comparisons. I'm sorry, but it's just, it works out the best. Mario 64, I get a game over, You get booted back to the title screen. You get the whole like, oh, you got a game over. You start from outside the castle with more lives. I think it's 4. The punishment was getting kicked out of the level and having to run back to it again. You know, like, that's bad, and I hate it. Ugh. Hate it. Alright, as far as progression goes, it's all about collecting those red remotes. Red remotes will unlock boss levels, beat those to get gold remotes, and then gold remotes will unlock the next area of the hub world. The boss fights are all different, which I'll give the game credit for that. They're not in any way similar to each other. One of them you're on like a Gilligan's Island style thing, and you're moving around, whacking fireballs back at your opponents. Another one you're in this like laboratory, and you have to race the boss to hit a switch in time. And then the last one was the one I remember most from as a kid, because I'm a big Godzilla fan. It's Gex as Godzilla fighting the bad guy of the main game as Mechagodzilla in like a big cityscape. So there's a lot of variety there, and I like that a lot. But unlocking the gold remotes will eventually lead us to the final area, where the final boss, Rez, is. In order to fight him, we need 33 red remotes, which is basically all of them. Like, I think there's 35 total. I could be wrong. But you have to basically beat like the whole game to unlock this final boss fight, which doesn't, like, it isn't a bad thing in itself, but with the control problems and the camera, that's a lot of like frustration in these levels that just make me angry. Like the space levels, there's 2 of those, and the second one is just a complete nightmare. I hate it so much. The last Kung Fu Theater level, though, was pretty fun. I gotta be honest. One thing about the levels I didn't really get into too specific with was that most of them are pretty huge. They can be pretty confusing, too. Especially the computer levels and one of the haunted house levels. They're very, very sparse. And because of the camera, like, you have limited perspective on the environment, which makes it seem more confusing than it might really be. Another nice thing about Mario 64, like, the camera is positioned in a way that lets you see the level as you're moving around, and the areas are pretty open, and it's pretty easy to see where you're going and where you can go. Gex is more about interior space, so it's a lot of hallways and stuff like that, so they're a little more confusing. But I will say, everything came together really nice in that last Kung Fu level. If there were more levels that worked like that one in the game, just as far as their progression, the platforming, just the fun, the game would be a lot better than I think it is, at least the N64 version at least. But getting all of that stuff done, we can now access the final boss. The final boss fight is against this Rez guy. He looks kind of like if the Shredder from Ninja Turtles and the Lord Zed from Power Rangers, I guess. Like, if they just like fused into one thing. It has 2 phases. Phase 1's the easy phase. He just, you get a free hit on him right out of the gate. One thing I'll say though, Gex and his friggin' motor mouth, the first time I fought Rez, Gex is spouting a dumb one-liner and Rez just crashes into me and takes a free hit. So every subsequent attempt, I'd be mashing the A button to jump as soon as the level started. But you get a free hit out of the gate, all you have to do is dodge him, shoot these bombs at you, and then you can either whack him or make him crash into this center electric field 3 times. That'll move to phase 2. Also known as the impossible phase, at least compared to the first phase. Rez grows in size and now tries to smash you. The objective being you want to make him smash these buttons that cause giant TVs to fall on his head. And I really struggled with this. I mean, again, cue the montage. figure out what I'm doing wrong. He just always hits me when he does the smash. And you get 4 hits, so he takes 3 in this phase, which means that, yeah, in theory, you could just, like, allow yourself to get smashed on top of the button and then win. But more often than not, he'd smack me in between. Even looking up, like, a video of it online, the guy in the video did the same stuff that I was trying to do, and he wasn't getting smashed. So I was just, it was tough. But I eventually figured it out, and I was able to win. So hitting him 3 times, kaboom, and then there we go. The game is over. He just kind of like, and then the game is just done. End credits roll. There's no ending thing. It's just over. End credits are over, showing you where all of the bonus remotes are. Every level also had 2 bonus white remotes, one of which you get by collecting enough of the pickups, like the kind of coin equivalents of the game, the other of which is just kind of hidden somewhere. These don't contribute to giving you a better ending, though. It's just concept art, which I mean, like, we have the internet now. I don't need to work for that. I would have totally committed if it was all concept art. But yeah, okay, Gecko 64 over. Kind of a mixed bag. Nostalgia is a very powerful thing. You can look back at stuff and think that it's, you know, the coolest thing ever, and then pick it up as an adult and you're just like, oh, gross. And that's kind of how this was for me, to be honest. It's got no presentation. The hub world's kind of bland. The levels and the overall gameplay are fun. If it wasn't, I wouldn't have been committed to beat the whole thing, obviously. But the camera's frustrating, the controls are imprecise sometimes. With it having less voice dialogue, Gex is saying a lot of the same one-liners over and over and over again. Some of the levels are frustrating, even without considering the camera and the control issues. It just kind of compounds on it. Although, like I said, there are some really highlight ones. That last Kung Fu Theater one was really great, and I enjoyed like all the Haunted House ones. And one of the space levels, the first one of the 2, is pretty great too, to be honest. So it's got high points. I'd say it's probably like a solid 6 out of 10, mainly for its control and camera issues. I can live with the no presentation, I guess, but I mean, just for fun, here's the PlayStation 1 version. So we have an opening cutscene that gives us the setup of the story. Rez is back, and the government, I guess, wants Gex to go into the media dimension once more and find him. Gex agrees when they offer to pay him a bunch of money. He gets a nice the tuxedo out of like, you know, James Bond, which is why he has that on. By the way, there's that context. And we go forward. There is an ending cutscene too that has Rez talk to Gex and say like, "Wait, I am your father. I look like this because I fell into a scrap heap trying to get free cable." So there, you know, there's like an actual ending cutscene. And there's more after that too. I won't give it all away. You know, hey, work for it. The PlayStation 1 version, though, is really good. I really enjoyed playing that. I don't like that it's limited to using the D-pad, because I guess that came out before the PlayStation 1 controller that has the analog sticks came out. But it isn't all that bad to get used to it, which is amazing that the one that has a D-pad controls about the same as the one that uses an analog stick. That's like just how bad it is. That's the problem. But it has nicer visuals. There's more Gex dialogue. PlayStation 1 version is the one I recommend, 100%. There's one more Gex game that's on N64, Gex 3 Deep Cover Gecko. I have actually never played that before. I own it now. Same retro game shop that I got that Xbox Godzilla game had it too, for a good price, so I picked that up. Haven't touched it yet though, but I think that's enough Gex for one day. Yeah, not good, not bad, just kind of, you know. It's just blah. It's like being at a luau at Mel Blanc's house. Okay, so that does it for this revisit. Good to be back. More content coming down the road. the other series on the channel, Just Playing, that goes up 2 times a week, so keep an eye out for that. Definitely subscribe if you want to get notifications. I'm currently doing Mario 64 playthrough and a Yoshi's Story playthrough on that series. More coming down the road. I may film more and do more than 2 times a week, who knows. But yeah, good times. I'll see you guys on the next one.